I'm going to be working with the saddle pad again, and now I've done this somewhat in the around pen, and then I was in protected context, so I was on the outside. So now, since I've made my around the round pen, I'm going to work on it in a different location, and I'm going to do it a little bit closer to him and a little bit more because I can be next to him and he can move a lot more. So I want just to work on putting the saddle paddle on, putting it in different positions, not necessarily just on his back, and then having it fall off of him. So he already knows how to side pass up to me, so I'll ask him to side pass up, and then I'll go ahead and put the pad on. And I have my target too, and it's a little bit further away in this video, but you can kind of get the idea of what we were trying to accomplish here. But I'm just gonna kind of mess with the saddle pad a little bit, and like it'll be like halfway off of him, and then I can give him a reward. And it's kind of touching, you might not be able to see, it's touching the rope that I have on for my around the round pen. So I want him to get used to that and be okay with it moving around and not be afraid when I start pulling it off of his back. I've since upgraded my around the round pen because a lot of my horses, not necessarily Castor, but like Atlas and Rhett, were a little bit weird about the rope because it is a piece of this electric rope like that they have in their pastures. It's just not electrified. So I switched it up for PVC all around plain rope. So that worked a lot better. But I'm just gonna put the rope, or not the rope, the saddle pad up on his neck and just gonna move it in different places and make sure he's cool with that. So that does a couple things. Like if his saddle were to fall off or slip around, or if I want to put a blanket on him someday and he has a neck cover, whatever, like he just gets used to having things in different places. Like stuff happens, the saddle could slip. I don't want him to think only saddle pads go in this place on his back, and if it goes to a different place, it's terrifying. I don't want that. I want my horses to be used to all different kinds of things, and be like, most of the time the saddle pad's here, but sometimes, it's somewhere else. See, that time when I pulled it off, which is why I want to do the desensitizing, it hit the rope and it made it wave, and you can kind of see that on the camera. So I really wanted to make sure that he was cool with that before I did it, and then I didn't want him to be afraid because like of this pad falling off because the rope moved. Just be careful of that. If this is all you have access to, be sure your horse is okay with the rope moving before you do this. Or you might have to be really careful with pulling the pad off and not touching the rope, was really hard for me. So, or build this out of something else. You can use ground poles that are raised or something else. So I'm just having him walk around with the pad on a little bit. I'll reward him for that. Then I'll go ahead and pull it on the ground, and I'll reward him for that as well. So I'm going to be building up to pulling off the pad while he's walking, and my goal is for him to stop moving when that pad falls off of him. So I want him not only to be not afraid when the pad comes off, but also stop. So if I were to fall off, the saddle were to slip, whatever, he'll just stop and be like, okay, this is fine. Not a big deal. So that's my goal. And I'm just kind of starting that exercise with him because he's had the pad come off, and that was just kind of some initial desensitizing stuff. But now I want to make sure that if something were to go wrong, that he would stop and be okay with it. So. And I'm just reminding him of carrying the saddle pad around. He's doing fantastic with it. He hasn't carried it around in the arena or had it around the round pen there. I just kind of put the treat on the pad. So this is a new location for him as well. So, and I like, be careful with that too when you're, like, I picked that pad up from underneath his front feet. Make sure your horse is cool with stepping on stuff, like Castor's already went over the tarp and plastic and everything like that. Make sure they're cool with like eating a treat off the pad, and they've generalized to that if they're afraid of the pad in any way, because if you go ahead and bend down there and pull it up, they could strike out. So just make sure that your horse has all those steps in place first. So I'm just having him walk next to me and do a little bit of leading slash lunging. Mostly I'm looking for lunging here, so if he's in front of me a little bit, that's fine. But I want him to just walk around with the pad, and do some stuff for that. And then while he's stopped, like, I'll just kind of pull it off from different angles too, because you don't want to get stuck on one angle. Like, I kind of pull from the shoulder a lot. Make sure you can pull from behind, and then eventually I'll go ahead and like pull it to where it kind of falls off like his hindquarters, and then I'll pull it from the opposite side so it land on his right side. But that's gonna be later on because I don't want him to spook and then end up like hitting one of the ropes or jumping into the round pen or running over me or anything like that. So I think he just got confused there. I was asking him to go forward, but I want him to walk with the pad in a different location as well. So this isn't like obviously the normal place that the pad would be. I'm just having him follow the target. I wanted him to stop. That's what was happening here. I wanted him to halt, and he just kind of swung around and faced me. So I was just holding out my target so he would go ahead and halt there. But you can see he's not at all worried about where the pad is. Like he's totally cool with this. There I can pull it off from a different angle. He was just confused about the halt. And he did that in the beginning. He'd want to stop and face me versus just stopping straight. And that's going to be probably mostly from when I was lunging him before using negative reinforcement, and he'd have that hindquarter yield and face me. So I think he's just a little confused. It's not a big deal. I'm using my target to just show him that I want him to stay straight and parallel to me, and then I'll reward him for that. So like there again, he thinks he needs to turn. So I'll just go ahead and ask him to walk again, ask him to halt, and then I'll reward him for staying nice and straight. But I've just moved that pad up so it's like kind of on his withers and his neck, and then I'll pull it off from there. And there I mean, I want him to get used to having that pad in front of him. Like if I were to fly off and land in front of him, like that's a possibility. I just want him to be cool with all of the different things that could happen. And he's doing an awesome, awesome job. So I am really happy with where he's at with this. And then after this, I'd go ahead and do this with my, just like my junk saddle, like one that is just cheap and like if you could get one from a tax sale or you have one rolling around your barn. And I'm going to do the same thing with that saddle and just pull it off of him. So that's going to be kind of the next steps in this process. So I ask him to walk on a couple steps and then ask him to halt again. So I'm also working on that halt and working on that straight halt. And there you go. That's the pad from the other side. So we did lots of from him between me, and he was cool with all of that. So I went ahead and just tossed it off the other side. So and he didn't move at all. So I love that. But be sure that your horse has got all those steps before you do this. He's not flinching when the pad comes off. You've done it on both sides with the pad between you and the horse, and then go ahead and push it off of him on that off side. So you don't want him jumping on top of you or getting into the round pen or anything like that. So I'm gonna grab it back, and then he's cool with you reaching around him and doing all that stuff. But by the point that I'm doing all this work and the saddle work, like your horse should be pretty gentle at the time, if you're thinking about riding them. So I'm also gonna just take my time to like dust this off too, because I've got hay and sand and whatnot on my saddle pad. So it's just another desensitizing thing. I've got it open and I'm kind of smacking on it and shaking it out. So that's just another thing. And then I'm gonna ask him to back up, and then I'll hop out of here. But that was a great lesson for him. I really liked it, and then I'll kind of show you guys where he progresses from here.